Good evening, everyone. Before I call the meeting to order, I will ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices and remind members of council that during committee meetings, we are not to be using mobile devices for communication purposes. I'll call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock by recognizing the traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The Council of the Municipality of Brighton respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nations are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by the Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, that the October 23rd, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be approved as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And I will note that Councillor Wright has extended regrets for this evening's meeting. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof? There are none noted. We have no delegations this evening. I see no one in the gallery nor on Zoom that would provide us with a citizen's comment. That brings us to our staff report. I will turn the floor over to Director Whitfield.
Thank you, Mayor Ostrander. Before we get into departmental budgets for capital, you'll note that it's being done a little bit differently this year. We're going to fast forward the capital budget in advance of seeing the budget as a whole, because one of our guidelines that we have through our council meeting in August was that the capital levy would be an increase of 1% of the prior year levy plus the June 2023 CPI increase up to 2%. So 3% is the max. And we're presenting 3% increase in the capital levy tonight. I thought that it would be kind of beneficial just to go through some of the items that are in the executive summary and maybe if council has some questions about some of the information in here, that may be helpful to do that prior to the departmental reports. So we've included what those budget guidelines were again for 2024, just for reference. Also, the impact is to the taxpayers only on the capital levy tonight. So there's no real information to share at this point. The assessment growth I found out today coming from assessment from impact should be available on November 6th. So prior to getting into external budgets and operating, we should have our 2023 growth. Last year at some point, the Accessibility Advisory Committee, or earlier this year, Mayor Ostrander, perhaps the Accessibility Advisory Committee requested that we include information regarding accessibility related capital projects or any projects. And so we've included that at the bottom of page 3. The budget timetable has already been discussed and approved by council. And we may have some other dates that we have to fit in before we get to the public presentation of the 2024 budget. So we'll leave it kind of open-ended until we get closer to November 29th. Tax rate comparisons haven't changed municipality to municipality over several years now. They seem to stay in that same order. Increases are they're pretty similar from one municipality to another, and the order in which the lowest tax rate and the highest tax rate and everything in between doesn't really seem to change much. The summary of reserves start on page 5 and go to page 6, but we've also got, we also have in our books a large print pop out of the reserve summary for those that want to review that. It may be easier to read than some of the smaller numbers on these pages. The internal loan schedule is really tiny on here, so I would suggest that we look at the internal borrowing schedule that's in the larger print pop out as well. And external debt is something that I really wanted to talk to you about this evening because as we all know, the interest rates are higher than we'd like to see. So what we've done, much to my dismay, because I don't like to increase our internal borrowing, but we're continuing to borrow internally for all of those projects that council had approved as external borrowing projects until we can see those rates come down, because there's no sense in locking in for 10 years or 20 years at 5.45% when we know the rates will eventually start to decline, probably mid to late next year. So I wanted to council to be aware that we are borrowing internally for some of those external projects until we can get better interest rates through IO or the bank. And our annual repayment limit is found on page 10. And as you know, we see this every year from the Municipal Affairs and Housing. And it's just, this one is based on our 2021 financial information return. And each year they will bring us a new table on how much we can borrow. And I do not recommend borrowing anywhere near what we can because the repayment would be unaffordable, I believe, for taxpayers. Then we go into the total summary of the capital budget. And on page 12, we move into what our road infrastructure kilometers, what we're planning on reconstructing this year in 2024, next year, I should say. And you'll note that there's no asphalt roads. And the reason for that is that Prince Edward Street is going to cost a substantial sum of money, over $6 million, I believe, among the water, the wastewater, and the for the sidewalks and tax support. And so it's not affordable to do another large project in 2024. So we've kind of deferred everything within our capital plan that we're working on to start working on that again in 2025 and onward to get Marina and Wallace and Harbor Street and all of those projects moved forward again after this one's complete. It kind of ties our hands a little bit. So we want to make sure that we're sustainable in water and sustainable in wastewater. And so we've deferred at this point. And of course, what we are expecting that we should be able to resurface each year or over a 10-year period is shown through our asset management plan on the table on page 13. And all of our vehicles are listed. I had Luke, our fleet coordinator, sorry. I had Luke update this spreadsheet for us for this year. And so it's fairly recent information for council. And that takes us to general government. So Mayor Ostrander, I would wonder if you would like to just go through each department and have questions after each department, or even questions on the executive summary, as I promised I would answer.
So I think that's a good idea. We'll go department by department, but I will open the floor to questions of clarification on the executive summary. Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Linda, my first question, and I'll wait to hear what others have to say. As you said, the current rate of borrowing externally is 5.5%. Do we have a rate, an interest rate that for borrowing internally? And if so, can you tell me what that is, please?
Yes, that's a great question. Currently, the prime rate is 7.2%, I believe. And so we take the prime rate and subtract 1.75%. That's what we earn at the bank on all of our deposits. And so that's what we charge ourselves for borrowing. It's essentially the same. It's around 5.45%. I think it's exactly the same, but we're not locked into it for a number of years. And it also provides us a little bit more flexibility if we couldn't make, if interest rates stayed there for a couple, 3 years and we couldn't sustain the same amount of payments, we could reduce them or increase them if we could, if we had a little bit extra. So until we're seeing a better interest rate, I think that's the best way to go.
Thank you. Any other questions on the executive summary? My quick question on the executive summary is about Harbor, Wallace and Marina, since you brought it up. Is that area designed and just in abeyance while we wait to have money in our pocket?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it is designed. I think we're at 60% design at the moment. I have not seen anything at 90%, but as far as I know, there is 60% detailed design.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Councillor Fredis.
To Director Whitman, thank you. On page 13, it talks about the asset management plan, and it talks about the 10-year period from 2022 to 31, doing 129 kilometers of surface treated roads at a cost of 10.7 million. Which comes to about $82,434.50 approximately per kilometer. And then it talks about gravel roads. And if I read this correctly, gravel roads need to be done twice per year. And they're talking about 31.3 kilometers at a cost of 2.7 million. And that comes to $86,261.98 approximately. So I guess my question is, in light of the increased cost for gravel roads and the requirement to do them twice a year, is there not some merit in looking at making them surface treated in order to get a little longer life and a little lower cost and not having to involve ourselves twice a year with gravel roads?
Director?
For you, Mr. Mayor, on paper, that does appear to be what it's suggesting. From what I've been able to gather, the cost per square meter, if you're comparing apples to apples, is for a single surface treated road, it is, I think, roughly $5.75 per square meter. Double surface treated road is $8.50 per square meter, and a gravel road. Did a little addition this afternoon. On a gravel road, it's about $1.75 per square meter. So these costs, I don't think they're to me, they're a bit rough, and they're not actually the estimate in terms of what we are working with presently. It does appear, if you take the 2.7 million and divide by 31.3 kilometers, that does suggest, is it 86,000 that you came
Yeah,
to?
86,261.98 roughly.
Yeah. And it says here $4.5 per square meter for gravel road and $7 per square meter for surface treated road. My figures suggest a little bit more on the more liberal side when it comes to the gravel treated roads at roughly $1.75 per square meter.
Now, is the $1.75 for the first pass? So is it 2 times $1.75? Because they require it twice a year.
It
In
would
which case
depend.
we're getting
Yeah,
close to.
closer to the figure, yes. It depends. I don't say that it could very well be, but I can't really, I don't think we are doing twice a year. As far as I know, we do a few passes here and there. There are occasions where there are rougher patches, etc. But dependent on traffic volume, dependent on heavy traffic as well in terms of farm equipment, then you might tend to do it twice. You know, it's all dependent upon all of those types of things. you know, I still think it's roughly cheaper to do the gravel road in comparison to what this is actually indicating.
May I have a follow-up?
You may.
Okay. Okay, I think I understand the numbers and what you're saying. If there's the opportunity maybe to review it, to see if there is some merit in perhaps extending surface treatment to some of those gravel roads. I'm not pushing one way or the other. I'm just saying maybe we want to consider it. The other thing I note that I'm a little concerned about is that in the last couple of years, our average on roads has progressed from about 18 kilometers to 26 kilometers. We're kind of averaging about 23. And for next year, we've kind of thrown the brakes on and we're dropping it to 15 kilometers. And perhaps the chair can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the problems we've had in Brighton in past is we've thrown the brakes on things like that, and then it's a big scramble and a heck of a cost to catch up. And I wonder if we might not be wise to be considering bringing that 15-kilometer number back up to something that's more in line with the average the last couple of years. Not necessarily fully paved, but at least in surface treated, so that we don't fall behind again. And then we're faced with this huge obstacle and this huge cost to try and overcome in the years coming forward. Your thoughts on that?
Yes. Personally, we can confirm the numbers, Byron, what we discussed earlier. I'll try and confirm that out for you, and to suggest, take your suggestion on with regard to what roads we can look at, you know, if there are any, without you pushing us. So we will definitely take that into consideration. Yes, we are a little bit lower at the 15 kilometers of road that we wish to do. However, I think in 2022 is roughly 14.7 that we did. Last year we did like 21.7, of which there were carryovers from the year before. So ideally, we have come up with a figure roughly around 15 kilometers that we can work with the staff component that we have, and we feel comfortable that we can do that in terms of the longevity of the roads as well that we want to maintain. That those all play in terms of how we will maximize and be more cost effective at the end of the day, in terms of longevity, in terms of making that road last as long as we possibly can, giving all the factors in terms of how long it sits, the compaction, etc. All of those have to be considered. And all of those, I think, have been taken into consideration when we come up to that figure of 15 kilometers. We can adjust it. We can do a little bit more, but I think we're very comfortable with that figure that we have, given all the components of staff, resources, and everything else that we have to take into consideration in terms of planning and so on.
And I'll just get everyone to turn to page 12 for a second, where that table that Director Whiteman was discussing, and where it notes that this year we're contemplating through this portion of the budget 15 kilometers of roadway, and the annual goal is 15.5. So I'm comfortable knowing that in the past few years where it bumped up above that, it was either carryovers, extra carryovers, and or catch up we were doing from previous years of not doing those 15.5 kilometers. It's nice to know we may be almost there, and now we're in that transitionary period. We're in that period of we can now do that 15 kilometers of road every year, and know that we are keeping up with the needs of the rural area. My bigger concern is actually the 1.65 of paved roads, of urban roads that we're not doing. But I'm happy to have that discussion when we get to Public Works. Anything further on the executive summary? Go ahead, Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you again. Another question, Linda, for you on page 10. The second small paragraph regarding the internal borrowing total is above our comfort level. Is that above the comfort level of staff, or is that something over the year that you've maybe kind of felt out that council is concerned about it as well? I mean,
It's not a real benchmarking comfort feeling. It's more of, last year I said to council that I didn't feel like we wanted to go above that 3.8 million as a balance of internal borrowing, just because of the dollar amount of reserves that we have. So essentially we're borrowing from reserve funds, and we're borrowing from reserves to get there, right? Because we can't touch our development charges. We can't borrow from our development charges outside of development charges or parkland. And so I don't want to extend internal borrowing to the point where we don't even have the reserves to cover it if we had to repay it tomorrow.
right. And that, I guess that might be some of my concerns as well. And there again, the reason for the previous question regarding interest rates. So we'll just see where this goes, and we'll see what council comes up with later.
Thank you. Anything else on the Councillor Fredis?
To the chair, to Director Whitfield. Just a couple of questions. I note your concern about the internal borrowing, and you briefly touched on the page where you summarized external borrowing. And I think I heard you say that you wouldn't recommend we get anywhere near the 39 million. And I wholeheartedly applaud that. This is more a statement than a question, but I will get to my question. Our current borrowing is about 8 million. Actually, it's 8.8, but I'll use 8. We're looking at 25 million for wastewater. I'm going to guess about 6 million for a fire hall, a couple of million for land banking, probably another 3 to 4 for servicing. And Prince Edward's going to cost about 6 million. And a Merc, if we ever get one, is another 6 million. So I'm at 48 plus 8, it's $56 million. Something's going to have to give somewhere, which is why I'm glad to hear that we're not inclined to go to the 39 million. My questions relate to the reserves, though. My feeling is that they're declining somewhat significantly. The first page of reserves on page 5 talks about reserves from December 23 going down from 3.9 million to 3.1, which is a 12% reduction. And the reserve fund going from 4.2 to 3.5, which is a 14% reduction, which I presume is a result of a lot of this internal financing that we're doing for a lot of these projects to try and cap or control the budget increase. Is that?
So we through you, Mayor, we do carry the internal borrowing on the cash side of reserves, like the cash side goes down, but the reserves stay the same, and we have another account that is borrowed from reserves, which you're not seeing here. So when you see the reduction, they're actually being applied to specific projects for the year. So we'll use, if you don't mind, we'll use Public Works for an example. So Public Works is going to have some projects that they're carrying over at the end of the year. And those projects will be carried forward to be done in 2024. So in the sheet that you can't see, which is the 2023 estimated reserves by the end of the year, they're actually transferring into the reserves to bring it up to that 1.4 in order to bring it back down when we use it in 2024. So we add it in 23 and remove it again in 24. I could share with members of council the two spreadsheets together so you can see, because I make a lot of notes. If you see all those red dots on that sheet, that's me making notes on what's going in and out. So perhaps if I shared those two sheets, you could see follow it through the budget and you could see where it's going into the reserve at the end of 23 to come out of the reserve in 24 to fund a project. Engineering is a good example of that, where we're carrying forward. And actually, if you look at the capital pop out, the capital projects pop out, you can see there's several projects here that say carryover beside. If they were carried over the year prior and we're using reserves, we're not transferring out of reserves and into reserves. We just leave it alone. But if it's a project that had tax support in 2023 and it's being carried over, then that tax support portion is carried over into reserves. I know that's confusing. So what I suggest maybe is that I share those spreadsheets with you on the Excel sheet itself so that you can follow it through. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions maybe next Monday on some of that. Okay.
As long as your spreadsheets don't make it more confusing.
They just may.
Very well. Well, let's carry on then. Any other questions on the executive summary? All right. So then we move to general government and Madam Clerk, I guess I'll get you to take us through this.
Most of it on here is facilities, which is Danny, but I don't think Danny's here. And the only thing that I have on here is for the new microphones for the council chambers.
Well, you don't like these ones?
No,
Why? Because they only work half the time.
right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we can't get any parts anymore for these
Yeah,
microphones.
no,
so-
I get, I was being sarcastic, you know that. Who wants to take us through the capital projects involved at the 35 Alice Street location? Director Whiteman has been voluntold.
Not really, but anyways, here goes. We have a carryover of the generator that has been there for some time. I think that had a lot to do with transfer of lands and so on, and we didn't know where to put that generator. So that's the reason for that carryover at this particular moment in time. There is an air conditioning unit as well. I'm not familiar with that, but I know that that also seems to have been something that has been outstanding for a while. Am I correct? So a lot of that also, there's a lot of work that has to be done in the basement, which we intend to do. And the replacement of the two HVAC units, I believe those are at 170. They're upstairs? Oh, on the roof. Oh, the stuff that's up on the roof. Okay. There are things that need to be done there as well. So yeah, there's some outstanding work that needs to be done, and it has been carried over for a bit of time. But I think there's also some things that have been in the works in terms of transfer of lands and so on that have curtailed some of that work that we intend to do and need to finish.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to Director Whiteman. If I read this correctly, then the building has 3 AC units. One is going to cost 12,000. And then the other 2 are going to cost 32,500 collectively. I note that they've been carried forward for a couple of years, and I guess I fully support actually getting something done rather than adding to the pile of things to do. We'll come to it a little later on, but I note that there's a couple of AC units at 170, the medical services building, that also have to be done, but their price tag is about 70,000, as I recall. So I guess what I'd be interested in learning more about is what's the tonnage differential between the units here and the units there? Are these 5 and 10 tons? Are those 15 and 20 tons, and hence the differential in price? Or are they virtually the same capacity? So just a little more clarification to help me better understand the dollar significance.
For you, Mr. Mayor, yes, as far as I know, and I'm aware, the capacity, okay, first of all, there are 3 units, the AC units at 170 Main Street. One is okay, it's close to its life expectancy. The other 2 have reached their life expectancy. So they need to be replaced. So that's for sure. I think their capacity is much greater than the capacity that is here. I don't know about tonnage and all that stuff, but I do know that the capacity there is much a much heavier load at 170 Main as opposed to Alice Street. I can get those figures for you and I'll provide you with those figures as well.
When you get those figures, could you send them by email? I don't think they need to be part of the a budget report or anything like that. If you just send them to members of council by email.
I will provide to everybody.
Thank you. Any other questions on the general government report, members of council? There've been lots of background talk about this physical space at 35 Alice Street, in particular the space we're in now, and its tired look. Nothing wrong with the 1972 basement rec room, but your council chamber probably shouldn't look like it. At the end of the day, we're going to be building a brand new fire hall right next door, and I'm just, not presupposing anything, but at some point, we're going to have a conversation of what are we putting in that fire hall, and should it include other things other than just, sorry, chief, other than just fire services, given that, once we put footings in the ground, we might as well build something that's going to last not just the fire service, but the community for 50 plus years. So I think as we future gaze, it would be a good idea not to sell ourselves short when we're doing a large build like that. And that brings us to the fire department.
Okay, your worship, council members, so we've proposed our 2024 capital. There's a synopsis for each. I can go through each line item if you'd like. Just quickly, so most of these, out of these items, 7 of them are for health and safety items as well. So our bunker gear replacement program that we've had in place is another 10 sets of gear. And what that does for our 45 firefighters is explained in here. Builds up our inventory. Our gear lasts 10 years. And the more calls we do, so, say we do 400 calls a year, you're putting that gear on 4,000 times over its lifespan plus training. So they do wear out. Right now we're in pretty good shape, but we do need to continue on with that program. Out of the 45 firefighters, we get 10 sets a year, 9 sets with the price increase, but 9 to 10 sets a year. Hose replacement, and just speculating, but I think we must have bought all our hose at the same time 20 years ago, and it's starting to fail more and more, and the guys are pretty good at checking that. We had some more failures this year as well. It seems like a big dollar value, but a 50-foot section of 4-inch hose is right around $900 for one section. And like I say, depending on how you care for it, you will get 15 to 20 years out of that. Station 2 interior renovations and shelving and hose racking and so on. We have some storage issues back there that can be fixed relatively cheap with some proper storage and just getting all the materials off the floor and making it more safe for the guys for a safe work environment. Two-way radios and pagers, that's ongoing, just maintaining and trying to get rid of or trying to keep up to date with what we have and get rid of our old analog system, because we are going to a digital system here, hopefully in the next couple of months. And that's also huge health and safety with today's firefighting equipment and being internal and having, constant communication. Extrication equipment, we do generate quite a bit of revenue from the 401. And this would be an additional tool that I was actually surprised when I came to Brighton that we didn't have, is a telescopic ram that we use. It's a small piece of equipment, battery operated, that we can put in to do dash rolls and steering wheel lifts and so on. There's many uses for it, but that's the primary use. Carbon monoxide and the 5 gas detectors for all our VOCs and so on. We use that probably 3 or 4 times a week right now with carbon monoxide calls. And they have a life expectancy of 5 years. So again, I think we purchased them all at the same time. So we're trying to keep that ahead of that. Personal CO alarms as well. That was a call was in Hamilton Township, where they actually had them fastened to themselves, went to a medical call, and there was a fatality there. So it did save the first responders right off the get-go. So that's quite a story that Hamilton Township has to tell, that how much these $400 personal meters actually work. So currently our firefighters and our EMS partners have them right on their medical bags. So when they go into any environment, they know that right off the bat. So little side story there. Drone, that we've noticed that over this past summer, we've had 2. We had 1 drowning in Rice Lake, 1 drowning in Trent River, where the drone was used to locate the person from the air. And it's becoming more and more for inspections, for scene size up, for grass fires. It's technology that is there, and it's relatively cheap now. It's come down in price. So all said and done, and as well as Caroline, our media person, was very excited to share this with us as well. We can use it for Caroline's events. We'd house it at the fire hall, but we could use it for other events, including public works and so on, if they wanted to water treatment, any of them kind of departments. We just have one in town. UTV doors and heaters. So we learned that last Christmas at that big storm where we had to keep transferring our firefighters out of the unit to keep them warm, just due to weather conditions. And the people that we were transporting were really glad to see the rescue unit when they got there, because they were already cold when we picked them up, and they were really cold when we got them back. So that it came out of the follow-up or the hot wash from the emergency exercise. So we did get prices, and that's what that's for. Emergency vehicle suppression system. So basically what that is a great big huge blanket that we will cover up the vehicle with. Right now with the lithium batteries and so on, there is really no way to put them out. Most of them are just letting them burn out. We can cool it with water, but we can't extinguish it. So with these blankets, what it does is encapsulates it, gets rid of the oxygen, and it really slows things down. We still have to use water, but it's not an uncontrolled burn at that point. And our concept is that if we use one of these, like say on the 401, we would rebuild the insurance to replace them. So it's just the initial startup cost of these blankets. I know Trent Hills just did a demonstration, and they do seem to work. It's pretty simple technology for now until we get figured out how we can actually extinguish these things. The design for the new fire hall, which you just mentioned, your worship. So now that we do own the property and we can move forward with our conceptual design, and I think next steps would be to tour council around a few different fire halls that are in there right now, get some ideas. If we're going to put a council chambers in or a community room or whatever we're going to do to try to fit it in and build it for 50 years, do it right the first time, and move forward from that. So this money was a carryover from last year, which we just got the land the 1st of September. So we're not doing too bad, and we'll get moving forward on that with everybody's input and the community input as well. That's all I have for this year. It's pretty low.
Just a few things there. Thanks, Chief Thompson. Questions or comments? Councillor Bowell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the chief. I guess I will start off with the EV, the electric vehicle suppression equipment.
Mhm.
That $10,000, how many units is that, individual unit?
So that'll buy us 2 blankets for each station.
So they're roughly $2,500 each?
Yeah.
And are they single use items?
Depends on the amount of fire that's there. So if it's a really heavily involved fire, yes.
Okay,
That's when we would rebuild the insurance company for that fire.
and are insurance companies paying out on those?
Yeah, we have a very good success rate.
So if it is let's call it a single use item,
Mhm.
because potentially single use item, and it's restockable. Would that still go under capital?
I'm gonna ask the boss. That's the way that we've done it here in Brighton. But we could take that out of operations for sure. Like it could go either way in my mind.
Oh, yeah,
The other part about being single use, if it's contaminated with the smoke of a car,
yeah,
we're probably not gonna put it back on the truck,
probably
right?
not.
So that's one of the reasons why we have single use, but
Possibly,
again, it depends on how severe the fire is.
okay. And thirdly, what is the cost to dispose of one of these blankets?
Good question.
Yeah,
I would say we put it in a 45 gallon drum and ship it to Green for Life or GFL. And let them handle it.
okay. But they're gonna probably treat it as a hazardous material, correct?
They would have to, yeah.
Yeah, so do you have any idea what the cost associated with
No,
it?
but I can find out because that's gonna be a question for the entire fire service that will go across the province.
Okay. And if anyone, I have other questions, but I'm sure others do as well.
Will you bring that information back on disposal for us, chief?
Yep.
The next meeting. Director Whitfield, would you mind speaking to the capital versus operational with regard to the blankets?
Say sure.
Sure,
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Yeah, so I didn't see them as one use. Perhaps we revisit it, but if we're gonna be able to keep them a little bit, use them once or twice or 3 times, and maybe this is gonna be an ongoing capital item. Whether they meet our threshold for the capital under TCA, I would say probably not. But not everything that we put in our capital budget meets that threshold anyway. So I was, Gene says it's all about fire, and I was just trying to make him happy.
But Director Whiteman will say it's all about public works. So, we got to figure it all out here. My thought was that because it's an initial purchase and we don't have any, the first round would be capital, and then moving forward, we would have them operational year after year. But I'd leave that to the finance experts to and the fire chief to figure that one out. Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. You're gonna get off easy, chief. This is not a question, just a comment. I don't think we can ever spend enough money to keep not only our first responders safe, but the folks of Brighton. I don't have any issues with your budget.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor. Councillor Ferretis.
To the chair, to the chief, and I'm also a big fan of the fire department, chief. But I do have to ask you about drones. Wondering if you had done any significant investigation relative to operating a drone under the new Transport Canada NAVCAN regulations. I'm modestly familiar with it because I fly radio control models here in Brighton, and there's a whole new set of rules and regulations that we must comply with. We are within 10 nautical miles of a Department of Defense zone. Here's the map. According to this map, the only place that we could safely operate this drone would be in Codrington, unless our operators had RPAS advanced certification and were flight tested for a unit over 250 grams. Failing that, the fines from Transport Canada and NAVCAN would be horrendous. So unless you've kind of got all of that covered and your folks are fully certified and qualified, and I've only been doing this hobby for 30 years and I'm not qualified yet either. So you might want to tread a little lightly on that one, but I'd be glad to share the map with you.
No, I agree.
Chief.
Sorry, I do agree with what you're saying. I heard it was under the 289 grams, as well as you couldn't fly over 800 or 800 feet.
400
400.
and it's 250 grams.
Yeah, So that
And a 250
I
gram,
will be honest with you, my deputy is way more techie than I am.
Yeah.
And he's the one that's been looking into it. With us, there is, we did have, he just left us there. We did have one pilot that took the course for his drone. And he has the same thing. You have to contact Trenton to let them know. There's a whole big process that goes with it. But we thought if we could keep it under the 400 feet and under the weight limit for the licensing would be the way to go. So
okay. Well, I'd be delighted to sit and chat with you and share with you kind of my knowledge of it, but basically a 250 gram drone is not going to be of much use to you. It's too small. I'll hold it in the palm of my hand
they're
and
very
wind will
small.
blow it away, right?
Right.
So it's not going to give you this stable platform that you need. You can get away with a 250 gram with a basic RPAS certificate, but anything over 250 gram, you need the advanced certificate. And there are a number of hours of study, and then you need a physical flight test qualification flight by an outside expert who will then sign you off and certify you to NAVCAN and Transport Canada. It's a fairly onerous undertaking. I'm struggling with basic RPAS,
Mhm.
never mind the advanced RPAS. So you might want to think about that one a little more. And if I can help you in any way achieving this, I'd be glad to sit with a coffee and a Timbit and share with you my limited knowledge.
Yeah, we're not afraid to ask for help, but for sure, we'll do more investigation into that for sure. We are aware of the Trenton Air Base being relatively close, and every day is a flight, every day is a, like an
Every
air
day's
show.
an air show in Brighton.
That's right. The GBA, right?
Thank you both. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you. Regarding the shelving hose rack,
Yes.
will, aside from safety and reducing tripping hazards, will it help extend the life of the hoses if they're up on a rack and off the floor?
Yeah, right now we just have them stored on the floor, stacked. They would be stored and ordered vertically, with inspection tags and so on. So
Okay,
we do have a few of the old shelves there. I'm not sure where they got them from. Looks like it from a school board or something, but they're wore out and
Yeah.
they're starting to fall down. So it would, yeah,
okay. It was just a point of clarification.
yeah.
Thank you.
So it's the first fire hall I've ever been in that doesn't have a hose rack. So
Any other questions or comments from members of council? My only question was about licensing for the drone, so I trust that you and the deputy chief will figure out how best to move that forward if we do go ahead with the drone purpose and for the purposes of a drone, and you'll take advantage, I'm sure, of Councillor Fredis's offer.
we will, your worship. Thank you.
Anything else on the fire department? Health services. Looks like Mr. Miller, you're up for this one, whether you like it or not. It's got your name on it.
Good evening, through you, your worship. I can speak to the cemetery, the Mount Hope. We're doing a columbarium. This year, the foundation's been poured. We're waiting patiently for it to arrive. Hopefully by the end of the month, it'll be here, and put together and be usable for us. If you notice the original columbarium, it has a stamped concrete around the foundation. So we're looking to match it with that, since the columbarium is going to look pretty much the same as what we have there now.
And can anyone else take us through the other portions of the health services budget? Director Whiteman?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we spoke earlier about the 2 AC units that have reached the end of their life, that we need to replace. And there are emergency exit stairs also at 170. And that need to be completed as well. So those are those 3 items that are there.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the director. Just reading that paragraph on the air conditioning units. So just to clarify for me, it says 2 air conditioning units at 170 Main are near the end of their service life of 15 years. We have 3 units, so total 1 is 15 and the other 2 are 17. So those 2 statements are contradictory. Are there 2 at 15 and 1 at 17, or 2 at 17 and 1 at 15?
For you, Mr. Mayor, I think we should take out that first sentence.
Okay,
I think it makes it clearer.
okay, so and the life cycle is estimated to be 15 years of age. And how often are they serviced, to the best of your knowledge?
I believe they're serviced annually.
In-house or,
No,
oh, have there been any ongoing issues with them, like repeat?
there have been recent
Okay,
issues. I'm not sure what there are, but I know there have been some issues that have crept up on them just over the last year, which lends to the fact that they've reached the end, I think, yes.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Miller, and it's really not even on page 20, but it is regarding the cemetery, Jim. When I look at page 16, we're still looking at rolling stock. I've just got a few things going around in my head here. So the 217 Ferris zero turn motor and the 2005 John Deere tractor, are they specifically used only for the cemetery, or are they housed up there as they're just cemetery equipment? We don't use them for anything else
To your worship, we just use them for
for the cemetery.
for the cemetery. They're there.
Okay,
We are replacing that 2017 zero turn.
right.
It was in this budget. We're expecting it again to arrive at the end of this month.
Oh, so we've already purchased that
We did purchase it through last year's.
through
budget.
last year's
It's
budget.
just, it's been really tough getting equipment this year.
Right. Okay. And I think, did I also read there's another zero turn later on in Parks and Rec that's being replaced as well
Yeah, we have a couple of units, our grass crew. mowers.
for next year if it goes through the budget?
If it goes
Okay. Okay. Just got a few things going here.
Thank you. Councillor Wilden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Mr. Whiteman, two of these AC units are at 17 years old. One of them is at 15 years old. The lifespan is 15 years. Is there any benefit to trying to milk one more year out of the one that's at 15 years, or would it be overall cheaper to do 3 at once?
Just to make sure what I understand, there's 3 units. Right? 2 at 17, 1 at 15. 1 at 15, I think, is still okay. We can get a little bit of life out of it. But the other 2 have provided us with some issues.
So we don't, I guess we're not trying to replace it when it gets to the end of its predicted lifespan. We're going to wait for it to die. Just want to be clear.
As far as we can tell, there's life in the one that is still salvageable, I guess is the way to put it. It doesn't appear to be showing any major signs. So we can get a little bit out of it, I think. Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to Mr. Whiteman. The units that would be removed, are those units that could be sold? Seeing that we're just at this point, we're doing some maintenance on them on an annual basis. But for all intents and purposes, they're still functioning, so they would have some value. It's not like the switch turned off and no one will ever use them again. What do we do with them?
A very good question. Quite honestly, I don't know. I don't know who would want to use those units. But I can definitely see if that, if there is something of value to them. I don't know per se at this point.
All right, thank you.
Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I think we're going to beat you up on these air conditioners, but I want to kind of go back to Councillor Wilden's comment as well. I kind of feel the same. If we're going to replace 2, why not replace 3 if we're going to have somebody up there doing all of that? I would also wonder if the 15-year-old unit is left, does that put stress on the 2 new units that we're going to put on? Are they going to have to work harder in order to help keep the old one still functioning?
For you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's a very good question. My best answer at this point is that I need to find out and what is the best plausible way forward. So I will also put that on the list of things to come back to you with, just to verify everything, that everybody feels comfortable.
And unlike the last question, you could bring that back to an actual budget meeting, because I think that's a good discussion for the budget purposes. Councillor Butler. Oh, sorry, no, Councillor Wield.
Thank you. The other question I have about air conditioners is related to high efficiency heat pumps. I know that there is federal infrastructure funding for upgrading energy efficiency. Has that been explored in regard to replacing heating and cooling units for 170 Main?
I believe so, yes.
Anything else under health services, members of council? Public Works. You're still up, Director Whiteman. And Leslie, we have read this report, so do keep it as high level as you can. I'm just yeah, I don't want you to skip anything, but we don't need to have you reading to us like it's a bedtime story.
I'll try not to.
Thank you, sir.
Guess I can be pretty boring. Just to start off with the building. At 67 Sharp, we do have narrow doors that were meant for trucks of the past or utility trucks of the past, and we need to enlarge those doors. Yeah, and there has been that is also a carryover, but we also noticed that our floor is decaying a bit at the yard, so we wanted to add that on to the widening of the garage doors as well. So we might as well do that as one component, as one project. We've had also a little bit of a carryover at Chatton Road Garage, so we intend to complete that as well. There's a list of equipment in terms of tandem snow pluck trowel, a 2-ton replacement of existing truck, 3/4 truck with harness only addition, fuel card upgrade, 1/2-ton mechanic truck, electric drive, on some located equipment that our utility gentleman needs. So that's there. In addition, so there's new additions to the fleet, including a 3-ton crew cab. That's mentioned. The fuel card system, I think there's a cost there, and the located equipment has been provided with some costs. We also know that there are guide rails that we need to continually work on throughout the municipality in terms of safety concerns for the municipality. There's some that I've been made aware of most recently. So that needs to be looked at, and we will continue to do that on a continual basis, annual basis, I'm sure, as we move forward, so that we sort of continue on the same sort of program. With regard to sidewalks, as we know, County Road 64, Prince Edward Street, is a project that we need to do and has been put placed on us, and in many cases has also as Linda pointed out earlier, this is something that we need to do. I think roughly the water component and both the wastewater, each of them separately, are roughly about 2.8 million. Water and sewer each. And roughly the sidewalk and boulevard are $1 million at the end of the day. It could be, the project is intended to be phased on, and we are in coordination with the county for 2024 and 2025. And our component is just roughly under 7 million for underground services. So that is really in essence, the project for next year in many cases, given the size and the magnitude of that project. We are also trying to keep in lockstep with our asset management plan, and have noted that there is one bridge, Hanson Road culvert, that has deteriorated. It's fine at the moment, but we need to look at it, and we have assigned a consultant to it, looked at it, and intend to hopefully construct next year as well. There is also, we're looking still at Telephone Road pit as the pit that we intend to use for excess fill. And we're also looking at some other sites as well. I think there's one up near Codrington. I went there the other day, where there is land there that we can use for our excess fill. The Telephone Road one, we are looking at our consultant there to explain to us the suitability of that land for excess fill. We can take the fill up to a 2-year period, separate it based upon taking it from municipal property to municipal property. If, as an example, the water main on Main Street, any fill that we have there, we want to transport it somewhere, and we need to do that over a 2-year period before we get any, what do they call them? Qualified person or something like that, they call them. Qualified professional to examine them, in terms of where those soils have come from, etc., and they have to be criteriaed properly. So we need to find that site, and we are working on that. There are some concerns on Greenway Circle and Lakecrest Circle in terms of the runoff and the stormwater that appears to be an issue, and we're trying to address that internally by looking at how we can better convey that stormwater for Greenway Circle and Lakecrest Circle. So it says here reconfiguration of stormwater ditches. So we are intending to do that as well. On our road construction projects, we've got Telephone Road as a double surface treatment, Old Wooler Road, Lord Road, and our singles are Newton, Cemetery, Alexander. The big question here, I think, might be some questions, but there are electric charging stations that we intend to put in at Sobeys parking lot. That has got conduit in it, or conduit has been provided there. The question is now to install and put that wiring, etc., in there. So we have an estimate of $280,000 that we have been provided with from someone in Whitby, I forget, a lexicon in Whitby. So we do have that in terms of if we intend to go with that. We sort of have an engineering consulting support at 250,000, new streetlights 15,000, transportation master plan carryover. The transportation master plan has begun. We intend to put on the website notification of the study. We should have done that today, but it will be up. We have a communications plan as well. So we have engaged with the consultant and intend to provide information to the public in terms of public information centers, as 2 of them, as well as a high school or youth information center as well, that the youth can be involved with any concerns that are related to traffic or transportation related. I think I touched on everything. I'm not sure. There's the flood hazard identification and mapping project that is being managed through Lower Trent Conservation Authority. And so that is still ongoing. And we have an engineer that is involved with that, although it is project management by LTCA. Streetlights, spoke of surface treatment. Yes, I think that really touches on most of what I wanted to touch on. I think it's there. Yes.
So Wilden.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I know that Mr. Gooding was looking into grants for the EV charging stations. That didn't pan out.
John did look at contacting there is a collective or collaborative of municipalities in Eastern Ontario that are trying to come together and determine what's their best course of action. I think we want to be one of them in terms of getting cost-effective ways and means. I think he contacted somebody over the last few days from Ottawa. I think the city of Ottawa, they've been involved with a lot of these electric stations and so on. And he was informed that there are some sort of, there's an on-charge grant funding that is also available, which provides 75% of funding for any project, with the caveat that you need to have 2 units with 4 what do they call them, the units themselves, and the 4 heads. Yes, there you go, 2 heads per unit, but we have to have 2 units, so 4 heads in order to it's contingent on that. That's the funding itself. We have been provided, and it appears to be roughly in a range of, you have to look at another transformer, which we do have one, but we'll need another one possibly, and some incidentals in terms of works, other works, civil works that go along with those things. So roughly anywhere from 550 to 600,000 for those 2 units and for so I do think that they would cover about 75% of the cost. So we have to come up with that 600, roughly 150 to 200,000 in terms of a ballpark figure of what we're looking at, So there are opportunities. We're looking at those opportunities. That particular grant, I think, opens or closes, I can't remember which, in January of 2024. Yeah. And if, I guess, council approves, we would obviously go ahead with the application. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to Director Whiteman, I guess just to follow up on Councillor Wielden's question on the EV station. My recollection is that we budgeted and spent $40,000 last year for the EV station in the Sophie's lot, and now we're looking for 280,000 now. So roughly $250,000 to charge 2 EV vehicles. I'm a little troubled by the number because kind of the going rate of a level 3 EV charger is about 50,000. And unless we don't have transformers, but I think you indicated that we do have a transformer that would get us the 480 to 600 volts. I have to wonder where that 230 is going to, what it's made up of. Additionally, until this new program you've talked about, the ZVIP funding was capped at $99,999 approximately, according to the Government Canada website, through any one of 20 outfits. So it's interesting that there's the opportunity to get greater participation than that, but it's still a fair chunk of money. So I'm kind of wondering where we go from here, because I don't know how you retrofit another station in Sobeys without major reconstruction cost on a recently repaved lot. And then you have to ask, is that the right place for us to put it? Because you can anticipate that those parking spots are going to be taken up by shoppers. And thirdly, should we be funding this out of reserves or our gas tax rebate? Is this not the sort of expenditure that should be covered by our MAT tax once we start collecting it, because it's kind of tourist related and tourist driven? So I think my preference would be to see it go that way. And I have my reservations as to whether or not we can support two head units in Brighton, and certainly not in the Sobeys parking lot. I guess had they been in the community center in front of the curling club, readily visible to tourists and stuff, maybe. And then finally, do we have a business model? Do we know a rate that we're going to charge for the power, either per kilowatt hour or per hour, that's going to give us a return on this investment, whether it's 280 or 600,000 within 3 to 5 years? And I think that's some arithmetic that we need to do before we go too far down this road. So I'll kind of leave that with you. Just a couple of other questions, if I could.
If you can park those, I'm going to go to
Okay.
someone else.
Okay.
Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Whiteman, I see that we're looking to purchase a 2-ton a 2-ton truck this year. And yet, why couldn't we just purchase a 1-ton truck? What's the benefit of having 2-ton? We've always just had 1-ton trucks. I don't see the benefit of 2-ton at this stage.
I don't have an answer right now. I will try and determine and ask Danny what's the need for one over the other. I'm sure there is logic in terms of what he's been proposed, and I can come back to you on that.
Thank you. That's good. It's just, like I said, I'd like to know what the benefit of 2-ton versus 1-ton is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. With regard to the numerous questions about EV stations and EVs in general, I know that the EV Society of Northumberland has done a lot of work in making the business case. They did a lot of numbers specifically for Coburg, but I think a lot of them would be very similar for Brighton. I can circulate their report if that would be of interest to you, Councillor Ferretis. I'll circulate that to everyone. That should alleviate a lot of those questions.
Thank you for that.
For you, Mr. Mayor, you can circulate that to Jeff as well. Thank you.
And, Councillor Ferretis. Oh, no, I'm going to go to Councillor Botwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Whiteman, the half-ton mechanic truck, electric vehicle. What was the reason for choosing that one vehicle as an electric vehicle?
From what I understand, there are mandates from government, I guess, from the federal government as well, in terms of what percentage of our fleet should be electric vehicles. And we're trying to keep in tandem with that, with those mandates. And so we're moving in that direction. And I think we're trying to do that in this particular instance. It also gives more flexibility to our mechanic in terms of having an electric vehicle there where he is and stationed and so on. in terms of his maneuverability, from what I understand. And again, it's basically mandate from government, and we're trying to keep lockstep with them.
Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. In terms of the mechanic truck, it says here, the mechanic service truck 2009 is to be replaced with a new electric vehicle. And that presently 2019 Dodge is being used by the mechanic as a service truck, and it will be returned to the available operator fleet. That kind of suggests that you've got a spare truck there already. So why are we having to buy an electric truck for the mechanic if he already has one?
Very good question, Byron. And I don't have an answer at the moment. I think that we have been trying to keep in step with electric vehicles. We do have some vehicles that are, I think one or two, I'm not sure, that are done with, you know.
Mhm.
So I'll have to also try and come back to you with regard to that vehicle, where we can put it to use or not to use, whatever. Yeah.
Is this still on the truck?
Yes, well, follow up on the truck. While we're on it, I noticed from the sheet here, you have a 2008 Sterling single axle snowplow, 14 years old. Overall condition is below average and parts are becoming non-existent. I'm wondering why we wouldn't put that on the priority list. I think we all agree snowplow is kind of vital in this neck of the woods. And I think rather than if that other truck is not really necessary for the mechanic, maybe we start looking at budgeting to upgrade that snowplow.
Very good point. I'll have to take that in consideration. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. Just wanted to speak to the electric vehicle to answer Councillor Butwell's question. The overall lower cost of operations of an electric vehicle is where they really shine. And so by choosing a pickup that's going to get a lot of use, you're actually making it much more valuable. It basically lowers the cost of the vehicle over its lifespan the more you use it. And so taking the biggest gas guzzler and turning it into an EV saves more money over time. With regard to why it would be purchased now, it says right in the report that they're looking at least 2 years in advance for replacement because of supply chain issues. I know supply chain issues are worse with electric vehicles than non-electric vehicles. So if we buy it now, we might get it in a couple of years and we'll need it by then.
Councillor Butwell.
Thank you very much. I suppose to whomever. Having looked at a possible replacement vehicle for myself, a truck recently, I was told by a GM dealer that they do not have really any wait times if you're buying something stock. If you're custom ordering something or factory ordering, that you're looking between 4 and 6 months. EV vehicles, I know with Ford, are just a couple months out, 2 to 3 months. So perhaps it might depend on the manufacturer as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fredis.
Yeah, just to kind of parrot what Councillor Butwell said, you can virtually pick up a gas or diesel powered conventional pickup truck off a dealer's lot today, a work truck, not with cloth interior, not leather and all that sort of stuff, and drive it home within a week, just enough time to PDI it. In terms of the mechanic truck, this 2009 Chevrolet, I'm assuming that's always been the mechanic's truck, is 14 years old and only has 176,000 kilometers on it. It tells me that it does maybe 10,000 kilometers a year, enough for an oil change these days, which is about 7,500 K. I'm not sure, and I'm not disputing the need and the benefit of electric, Councillor Wheeldon, but to be spending that kind of money for a vehicle that's basically running between the Parks Garage and Sharp Road and occasionally a road trip for that minimum mileage seems perhaps not the best investment of our money. because we still have 7 to 10 years for compliance with the federal mandate for EV vehicles, light vehicles.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the Public Works budget? Councillor Butwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question on under road construction projects. It says wages for road work. What is that? Is that extra employees that we have to like flag people or? Thank you.
Director Whitfield.
Through you, Mayor Ostrander. Yeah, we distribute the Public Works staff budget through various jobs throughout the budget. We look at averages over the last 3 years and we say, okay, then the average was around 30,000, 35,000, whatever it is. That's our staff working on road projects, ditching, brushing, hauling gravel, whatever else they may do. And so that's built into the capital budget because it's part of the capital road project.
All right, just a quick follow-up. So we account for salaries elsewhere, correct?
Throughout the budget, yes.
Throughout the budget. Forgive me.
If
where-
I could,
Yeah.
most of it is operating.
Okay.
So you're only seeing that one because that is actually wages that we're attributing towards the capital project. The rest of the wages are, you might see some wages in operating through ditching, through brushing, through sanding, through salting, like all the various areas. We distribute wages on average,
Yeah,
the 3-year average throughout the budget.
I'm familiar with that for allocating different work to different parts of the budget.
Yeah.
But I've just not seen it like this in the
In
capital
capital.
budgets before.
And that's why it's because they're actually hauling gravel to build the base of the road.
Mhm.
And that becomes part of the road. And so we transfer that to the capital project and it actually gets added together at the end of the year and is included in our capital.
Okay, thank you.
And forms part of the asset for management purposes over time.
Correct.
Very well. Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just for clarification before I ask the question, ongoing sidewalk work, not including the Prince Edward Street project, is that covered under operations?
That's correct. It'll be
Okay.
in the maintenance budget.
Okay, so I can ask that question later on. Thank you very much.
Councillor Paredes.
To the chair, thank you to Director Whiteman. You talked in here about an evaluation study of Telephone Road, kind of an environmental assessment. Was that simply for a place to kind of commingle soils from various projects within the municipality to stabilize them? Or could it ultimately be a home for dewatering and reclamation of sludge from our lagoons? Because that, as I recall, was a fairly significant issue not so long ago, and desludging was a major contributor to getting all of our numbers back in line, but it was a fair sum of money.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Telephone Road has really been we're studying it at the moment, the suitability of it in terms of a geotechnical investigation and whether it is suitable to take materials from municipal property, a reconstructed project like on the water main on Main Street, and take those soils somewhere. Yeah, but it has to be to a municipal property, which would be like Telephone Road pit. And they can sit there for 2 years or so before wherever you need to take them after that period of time based upon what the MOE tells us to do. So that was the essence of what it is what we were trying to come up with, and nothing really to do with desludging. Primarily just a little bit of insight in terms of the lagoon itself and the mapping of that lagoon. We are trying to map it out in terms of where some of the sludge actually sits or prevails at this point in time. But it is, it's in between. We don't actually know where it sits, so we have to map it out a bit more. And there are opportunities. There might not be many to remove some of that sludge, but we will find that out in the next little wee while in terms of what it is that the opportunities that present themselves. Last year presented bigger opportunities, so that afforded us the opportunity to meet our ammonia exceedances, etc. But I'm not sure, given the information that we have at this moment and the mapping that we're trying to get, whether those opportunities are as great as they were, let's say, for lack of a better phrase.
Any other questions or comments from members of council? I have a couple. With regard to the Harbor Wallace Marina area and the note that we would continue to fund the design to 90%. I'd also would like to know at some point, not tonight if you don't have the answer, when would be, if we do fund it, when would we be at that 90%? And if it's soon enough in the year, what would the cost be to begin reconstruction of that roadway? I understand that staff are for council's budgetary purposes are saying we're spending a lot of money on Prince Edward, but Harbor and Marina Wallace have been in discussion for half a dozen years or more. And, we're slowly getting there, but much too slowly in my opinion, and certainly the opinion of those who live down there. So I would like to see what it takes. The reality is that none of the roads are going to get less bad over the year. So in the world of, keeping up, we need to keep up. And I get that, totally get that Prince Edward Street needs to be done. It's a project in the works. We need to be good partners with the county, and that's where all our infrastructure in the ground is. So we do it now. But, it might not be a either or scenario for us. It might be, we better get on this. So without knowing the numbers, we can't make that decision. And I'd like to know.
To my best answer at this point in time is that the design should be completed by next year, right? I'm pretty sure that would be so. It is a pretty sizable project with most likely about 5 phases at least in that project, divided up into multi-years of completing that project. And it would range most likely, I'm just a ballpark figure, high level, probably closer between 15 to 20 million dollars in essence overall.
And that would be primarily Harbor Street, I assume.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Would there be any benefit in getting Wallace and Marina done, being smaller streets with less infrastructure underneath and less design work on top?
Definitely. That's been a consideration of ours as well. John has pointed that out, John Gooding, and that is, I think, where the first place that we want to go to in terms of a first phase.
So at the next meeting, would you please bring that information forward, the cost of that, when that design process would be done? Because if it's possible to do this year in any way, shape or form, I think we would be wise to at least consider going down that road. No pun intended. And my other question was the telephone road reconstruction. Is that from, I have my answer. Never mind. I just didn't look at the spreadsheet. Thank you. Any other questions on Public Works? Go ahead, Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. Director Whiteman, I know it kind of came forward at the very last minute and really didn't give you an opportunity to prepare a report for these meetings. And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate section in these discussions to ask. But should we be talking about a budget number for implementation of ASE?
I don't know if I should answer. I do think it's, I know I owe council a report and,
And we gave you short notice, I know.
yeah, I do intend to provide that report. And do feel that it I was thinking of in terms of a pilot project at first. Having purchased the device. And I think it would be a mobile device that we would consider. So for all intents and purposes, yes. I don't know, it could be roughly between 50 and 60,000 or so that we would need to consider for that device, but I'm sure it would pay for itself. And I'm sure that the pilot project would reveal that in time, in a very short space of time.
Councillor Fredis.
Again, I apologize for the director having such little time to put the report together. We were a little, because of this notice of motion thing and stuff. My own research says that your number of 56 to 60 is pretty good. I mean, the base unit is just under 30 with some HST, but what you have to factor in on top of that is a mobile data plan to commute the data to the cloud. And then you have to have access to cloud storage or rent cloud storage so that you can gather all the images and download. So I think you've got a fairly good and safe number for implementation of this thing. And the arithmetic kind of tells us that the return is 10 times that in the first year on 5 streets in 5 weeks.
Anything further from members of council? All right. Brings us to Parks and Rec. Mr. Miller, Director Miller, pardon me.
Through you, your worship. I think we've had the benefit of having that parks tour there a couple of weeks ago. So a lot of this should be fresh in a lot of the councilors' minds. Start off with the multi-purpose recreation feasibility study. That was recommended in our final master plan update as an initial first step in planning that facility. I will say that facility with all the entities that we're looking at is probably more in the ballpark of 26 million. Having talked to counterparts in Trent Hills, they are a lot higher than what they thought they were going to be, just because of the square footage cost. They're about $300 a square foot for an arena and a gymnasium build, and almost $400 a square foot for a pool. That's kind of the estimate at this point in time. So that is definitely to do on the to-do list. Now we're putting in an application for funding for that. I put it in 2 weeks ago to Ontario Trillium Foundation to get funding for that report. So with luck, we'll be able to get it funded. Ice resurfacer. Our Zamboni unit is 10 years old and we need to replace it. We try to replace it every 10 years just for reliability. It's pretty hard to run a rink without a Zamboni that's functional. And at 10 years, we generally get a pretty good trade in as well, which we would put back in reserves. Same with the lawnmowers, looking at 2 zero-turn mowers to replace the 2 that we have that the grass crew uses. We find 5 years is enough use for those, again, without spending a lot of money in repairs and downtime. We would put those units on gov bids, so we would get some money back and put that back into the reserves. The shed washer renovation project. We're hoping to hear some results shortly on that project. Either way, we do have funding for it in the budget. It definitely needs to be done. The washrooms are pretty old and worn. I'm going to go along with the shed now that we've got the front of the building, all nice. Peace Park Playground Project. That was put over from this year. We're also adding a couple of accessible swings to that project. So again, that'll be next year, next May. But that project should be completed. Signage upgrades. We do have some signs throughout the parks that need to be revamped. Some parks need signs, and so we put some money towards that. And lastly, trail construction. I've got a list of 3 or 4 areas in the parks where we could put some new trail areas to make it more accessible. Like at Peace Park, Wall Street Park. We need to do some more work on our new Cedar Hill trail link. And lastly, King Edward Park, we're looking to redo a section that's pretty worn right now. That's pretty much it.
Thank you, Director. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. I know when I was at Roma, I spoke with some reps from Simcoe, and I think Councillor Ferretta spoke with them at AMO about a funded study that they can do about retrofitting the arena. Is that something that I think I forwarded it to you back in February? Is that something that you foresee happening at some point? I think it was like 80 or 90% funded study that was supposed to cost $36,000. But I don't know. I just throwing that out there is something I remembered us talking about.
Through you, your worship. I mean, our guess our marching orders is on the strategic plan. And the strategic plan says that you're looking to build a new facility by 2030. And so this would be the first step, getting a feasibility study so to know what you're putting in, a site fit, because we do have land, study it as well as a business plan. So that's what's encompassed in this. Retrofitting what we have, honestly, I don't know if that's really where you want to go. Footprint of that building is so small. Based on what you see out around with the new facilities. I don't think you could possibly get to what you want to have long term, for the next 50 years with that.
So you're talking about including an arena in the new facility?
Definitely.
Okay, we haven't talked about what would be in it yet, so I didn't know that was part of it. Thank you.
I think the intent is to have all the things. Councillor, sorry, Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. One might be more geared towards operations, Jim. And it has to do with Mount Hope Cemetery. And I don't need the answers today. When we talk, I think Linda spoke about it a bit earlier as far as just wages being involved in maintaining Mount Hope Cemetery. Could I get a ballpark figure at some point or something that you could share with council? I don't need it today. Just a ballpark figure as to wages that we would spend maintaining Mount Hope Cemetery.
Yeah, I can get that and send it through to council.
Okay,
tomorrow.
thank you. I have one more question, but it's not a cemetery question.
Is it at least a capital budget question?
Yeah, it is.
Well, then
It's
carry
on-
on.
It's on this blue, it's on this blue part of the
Go.
paper. Jim, you have $15,000 earmarked for Harbor's capital expenditure. Can you explain what that is? I don't see that in the notes. That's all.
Sorry, that's last year's 2023 budget. Yeah, I have nothing this year.
Thank you.
Easy decision. Thank you very much. Councillor Ferrettis.
Through the chair to Mr. Miller. First, regarding the Simcoe thing that Councillor Wheeldon mentioned, even recognizing that the Merc would ultimately have an ice rink, my takeaway from their discussion was essentially They provide grant funding to do a study or analysis that would help us lower our ice making costs in our existing facility with a fairly quick payback, and recognizing that we could easily be 6-7 years away from the MERC, especially now that it's up at $26 million. It might be something you might want to put on your radar just to look at, to see if we can help lower operating costs for that foreseeable future. The other thing I wanted to ask about is you've talked about replacing 2014 Zamboni. And according to the sheet here, it's got 3,000 hours. Useful life, it says 10 years. Overall condition excellent, downtime minimal, and replacement parts excellent. I'm presuming that our chief mechanic put this assessment together. Zamboni alleges that kind of the useful life of their equipment is 18 to 20 years. So I'm starting to wonder if we might not be replacing this one a little ahead of its time. And in terms of the zero-tone mowers, I'm assuming that's the 2019 John Deere's, the 29 SS's. They have 984 and 1040 hours. And again, the mechanical assessment is excellent, minimal, and excellent in terms of parts replacement. And John Deere alleges that they rate these units for 1,500 to 2,000 hours before any significant repair work needs to be done. So I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't be looking at the necessity of replacing these things so soon in light of their rather modest utilization versus their expected life expectancy as claimed by the manufacturers.
Any comment?
That's ultimately a decision from council. We do have that time frame that we've used in the past years for this equipment. We've had run into problems in the past where we've had our grass mowers one extra year and it also been as a nightmare. Same as the Zamboni. I can't stress enough, you need a reliable machine. If it goes down on a tournament weekend, you know, you're in rough shape. As far as the Simcoe study, we do use Simcoe equipment in our plant. We have done every energy saving thing we can do for that ice plant. I deal with Simcoe a lot. I mean, it doesn't hurt for me to go look at that, but I've had things in the past where they've told me a payback and it doesn't happen. They're salesmen.
Yeah, they're not in it for nothing, that's for sure. So for council's purposes, if it's council's wish not to go down the road with a piece of equipment, we'll have that discussion at some point.
Your worship, I may say too that our job is to maintain our equipment. So you're not going to see me sitting here saying that everything's falling apart. We do maintain things. And you know, this is the time where I think we should be replacing.
Thank you. Anything else for Parks and Rec? Go ahead, Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. One question, Jim, you added 2 accessible swings to the Peace Park Playground project. I'm pleased to see that. Do you have a ballpark figure as to what those swings cost?
$20,000 to have them purchased and installed. For 2. Yeah. Accessibility equipment is expensive. Playground equipment's expensive. Accessibility equipment's even more.
Thank you. Anything else from members of council? Planning, building and bylaw. Director Walsh.
Through your worship to council. So the planning capital budget is on page 28 and 29. And the list top of 29 is largely what you would expect. We've talked about some of these things in the past for the most part. Firstly, the secondary plan, it is a carryover from 23, as it was from 22. Secondary plan, I do have to apologize. It has a project that has languished for a number of reasons. Some of the input information that we were dependent on for water modeling and sanitary modeling that was a bit delayed, and which the engineers for DM Wells who are doing the project were dependent on. And so we've had to pivot on that. And plus now DM Wells have lost about 4 staff, and I think they've really only recently got new resources available. So that was another cause for a lagging in the project. The plan is to reduce the scope of that project and simplify it and push it to the finish line. And then staff will also pick up some of the additional tasks, such as public consultation on it, once we have that deliverable in hand. So that's the status of the secondary plan. We haven't been asked to have additional budget for it from the consultant, to which I've said no. Let's just keep going and get this what we can get done. We've had the background report with the growth forecasts and other items addressed, which was very valuable and beneficial. So we have that in hand. And now we have some servicing information that in terms of a form of a presentation to council, it's in draft. And so we're touching that up. And then we'll finally get the deliverables of different schedules and policies for the last phase of the project. So we expect to have that early 24. We have talked internally of just maybe just doing this in-house as much as we can if we could find the resources. So there's some frustration at the level of the staff level as well with this project. So, but right now the budget is asking for the additional sum, and that is as per originally budgeted. Public consultation and public engagement is again, it's a carryover. I've been having some discussions with Jennifer White, who did a great job on the strategic planning exercise, and hoping that we could carry forward with that through her. She's now moved. I think she's living maybe even out of the country, definitely out of province. Okay, definitely very far away. So looking at alternatives to her availability, but we felt that even though there's a good framework for the draft that's been already done by staff, that it would be best to have it independent of staff, so that public engagement might be best done by a third party, and that's why it has been originally budgeted that way. The EIS, or environmental impact study, that's part of the secondary plan. Again, it's a carryover, and the consultant has been authorized to do that. We just found that some of our environmental protection designations were quite erroneous in terms of boundaries, and we lost confidence in it. So we felt that it needed to be revisited. And yes, the developers are still going to have to do some work on that at a field detailed level when development projects come forward. But for the EIS itself, in terms of the level of detail that's expected in our official plan documents, I think we can do better, need to do better. That's why that's there. The fourth thing is the land banking program. So we've had some recent discussions on that. That's a capital project that will return an asset to the municipality if budgeted and followed through with. And as an asset, I guess technically in the books, it comes to zero net. And it's also ultimately meant to be a positive revenue generator. And not only that, but also positive in terms of other public benefits, such as affordable housing and other interests of the community. And then lastly, some tracking software for different applications. There's a number of vendors out there, and currently Public Works Infrastructure utilize PSD citywide software for its asset management. And they do have a module specifically for planning, building, and bylaw. And we have had one presentation on it. It's not bad. Its price is lower than other competitors such as Cloud Permit, although I've heard some recent figures from other vendors that there might be a little bit more competition there. So there has been some allocation of the budget for software, and that's been even proportionately distributed between planning, building, and bylaw. It's a total of about 46,000 for the planning part. It's 22,000, and there'll be ongoing operating costs of about 7,000 per year for licensing. And as these things work, whenever you need a customized report, IC output from all the data you put in, then there will be additional costs, and that tends to be fairly expensive. So we've been asking to make sure any data that's been put into the system can also be readily exported in-house, so that once we get to know their fields and columns and things like that, I theoretically, not having seen that, we may be able to do some of that customization in-house, because it's not that hard when you're dealing with databases if you're accustomed to doing with them. So, but we are looking at all options, but there is something budgeted for work tracking software. And that's the long and short of it.
Thank you, Director. Certainly pleased that the department's contemplating permitting and planning software in order to help streamline and modernize things. And as long as it doesn't make life worse internally and from the customer facing point of view as well. So whatever makes everybody's life easier and doesn't break the bank, I think, is the way we want to go. Members of council, Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to Director Walsh and Director of the Granicus software. I know we had it in last year's budget, something like $40,000. My recollection is we only got Granicus kind of up and off and running in the last month or so. Does that mean that that funding kind of runs from the last month, let's say September till September of next year? And if that's the case, do we need to be budgeting a sum of money to get us through the end of fiscal 2024 that maybe has to go on that line? So that's my first question. And I guess my second question is
So hang on, I think I can answer that question. That would become operating at that point. So we've purchased the software under capital, but because it's an ongoing annualized thing, it will become part of the operating budget.
to the chair, you can't purchase the software, you purchase the service.
Then that's what I mean. So because it becomes an annualized service repayment, it's part of
So
the
it becomes
operational
operating?
budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. My other question is, Director Walsh, I guess we did the same thing to you that we did to Director Whiteman. We had kind of a late passing of notice of motion on impost fees. Looking for a report to come back to council on implementation for 2024. So I guess my question is, are there any budget costs there in terms of implementation of that, of those impost fees that you would anticipate that we should be making provision for? Or is it simply an enabling bylaw that would implement?
Through the mayor to council, on the impost fees, and we're probably going to defer that to the Director of Finance. I think that maybe the follow-up was going to involve Watson and Economists and Associates. I think they are in the business of looking at these things. And so it might be just part of that background study. Don't want to put you on the spot or make any promises there, but that's just my inkling.
Through you, Mayor Ostrander, this is an operating question. When we get to operating budget, hopefully we'll have a report back to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything further on the planning, building, etc.?
And this on the matter of the Granicus, I think it also goes under another budget. Doesn't go under planning so much. I think it got end up assigned under economic development because we partnered with the Quinte Tourism Board and with hopes that they would also share in the operation.
I see you've joined us, Mr. Hagerman. Do you have a comment?
Chair, I can confirm it. I signed that invoice last spring.
Very well, thank you. Given the struggle you had with your camera there, I thought I'd at least give you the opportunity to speak.
What that was all about, but we got it sorted.
Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Going back to page 3, Mr. Walsh, and this might be operations as well, Linda. Item 12, including a financial plan for the community improvement plan. I didn't see anything in your report. So does that fall under operations? Does that fall in a different space, or how are we dealing with that? Is that almost complete, that community improvement plan?
Director. Yeah, so the policy framework, which is issued under Section 20 of the Planning Act through an amendment to the official plan. So that policy framework is done. Final approval has come through from the county on that. And the funding, you'll see funding listed elsewhere in the budget document. There's 20,000 for affordable housing CIP and 60,000 for brownfield CIP. I can't put my finger on the page, but that's the current offering in the budget.
So we'll get there. All good questions. Just bookmark them for another day. Anyone else? Environmental Services, Director Whiteman.
Thank you. With regard to the design of the or the upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant, I think we have some encouraging news. We had a get together with the MOE today, and they want to work alongside us, and so that's encouraging. I think that was my interpretation of our get together today. They want to keep abreast of what is happening in terms of the design. Yes, they are quite adamant that council does now go ahead with the upgrade and finish, and that's it. That's what they want at the end of the day. So that is ongoing. Our consultants that have been appointed are part of that meeting. So it's going to be an ongoing meeting, I think a monthly meeting that we would engage with. And so that's well underway. They provided us with a work schedule. So things are moving, I think, in that direction. The truck carryover, I think we did go out to tender for a truck, and it was over that which was budgeted for. So that's back in there. There is Prince Edward Street Engineering. I believe the cost sharing agreement between county, ourselves, and the consultants for the design comes to an end in December 31, 2023. So the engineering work should be completed by then. And that's where that component comes in for on the wastewater side. The reconstruct for sewer work, underground work, sewer work is accounted for $2 million. It's a little bit higher than that, but we anticipate that that's where we end up. We are also coordinating with the county, with the Director of Public Works, to come up with a better plan that would not be so disruptive to our residents in terms of a phased approach to the construction and moving forward. So I just mentioned that, and I think that that geotech investigation for excess fill is the wastewater component to that, if I'm understanding from the public works side, wastewater side, and there's also a water component to that. So I think that's in there. So yeah, I think that's on the wastewater. I think we've spoke of that. Our costs to the Prince Edward Street Engineering that I've spoken of. We are looking at Telephone Road. There are other options for our disposal of excess soils. And we have a consultant looking at that to the suitability of Telephone Road just for that very purpose. So that's mentioned there, and we should be getting a report back from them soon, or though there was a change in a regulation as of today or yesterday. So there's a little delay in that report coming up, but I just want to mention that. we are looking at the wastewater component. I made up 75% for the underground work, which is sewer related. So yes, that's there. Going over to the water side, very similar in many respects. There's a geotech investigation for excess soils, 25,000 for the component on the water side. We have the water main on Main Street that has should complete the asphalt, I think top, I'm not sure, maybe John can correct me, but I think it's a shave and pave. So that should be completed, not sure top, but this week for the work that has been done. And they would remobilize in the spring to complete the remainder of the work on Main Street. The bulk water station has been a little bit delayed. It is a carryover. We had an EA process, and from there triggered, I think, an archaeological assessment, if I'm not mistaken. So that delays it going on, but it's going out to 10. I think it closes this week. So that is the civil works have been done as an extension of Loyalist and Applewood project. So the building that closes, that tender closes soon. That's Prince Edward Street engineering is again similar to the wastewater with the water component, 40,000 both. Reconstruction for water underground services of 2.15. That was also accounted for there because of again 75% of the underground work we anticipate to be completed with coordination and with maybe forcing the hand of the county as well, that this is the work that we anticipate without too much disruption again. I think that in a nutshell explains most of it, yes, in terms of environmental services.
Thank you, Director Whiteman. Members of council. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair to Director Whiteman. Thank you. I'm actually starting to understand the flow of some of these numbers now. But just a clarification to make sure I understood correctly, you've allocated some of the cost of the geotechnical to both water and wastewater. Is that simply a bookkeeping allocation, or is the implication I get from that is this geotechnical investigation of that fill is a potential home for some of the wastewater materials? Am I understanding that correctly? Or is there simply just an allocation of dollars?
You, Mr. Mayor, no, I don't think so. So there's a public works component, there's a wastewater component, and there's a water component, and total cost of 100,000. If go ahead, Linda. Sorry.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you. So we did allocate it that way. We will split each invoice that way. The tax support side is going to be for the base that's removed from a road, and this to go down and do storm sewers, which is tax support still. And then on that same road project, you've got fill that you're removing that has to do with replacing sanitary mains and water mains. And so we'll just allocate it so that each, because sewer or wastewater and water are each their own entity, so to speak, and they're self-balancing, we want to make sure that each entity pays for its own fill removal, so to speak. So we will allocate the invoices based on those same percentages.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that correctly, it's really for the soil waste from water and wastewater, that the infrastructure that's under the roads and not the lagoons per se. Okay, because it goes on to say here, and potentially a disinfection and sludge disposal system. And I guess what we've learned in the last year is addressing the sludge issue in the lagoon did wonders to improving our numbers, but it then gives you an issue relative to the sludge that you pull out of there. So if you can't use it a telephone road, I guess what this means to me is that there are systems that will pull the sludge, filter the sludge, send the good stuff back, and allow you to compact the bad stuff. Dewater it so that you can then dispose of it. And it says potentially. So are we going to be looking at that in terms of capital, or?
I think that's an operational issue, and from what I can see, and where you take that material, you know, take it to farmers' fields, right? So that's one option. I don't think we intended it to go to our telephone road pit. Intention was for excess soils from capital projects, in essence, I think, and that we need to dispose of those materials from municipal lands to municipal lands. And that was, I think, the original intention based upon the new Ontario regulations that have come in terms of what to do with those excess soils. So we are concentrating there. As well, I think as I mentioned earlier, the sludging that we, or desludging that we have, it did do the very purpose that it was intended to reduce some of the ammonia exceedances. But that was last year. And our mapping, we need to engage mapping at this point to determine where those opportunities possibly lie, if they do lie anywhere, given that we've taken out quite a bit of material from what I understand. So that mapping would help us determine what we do have in terms of our lagoons and how much materials we do have in terms of sludge, and therefore we'll need to also work out where we're going to take that, you know, in terms of in time to come. I don't think there is as many opportunities as there were, let's say, last year, and that's where I think we are at this moment in time.
Anyone else? Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Whiteman, I wanted to, or it might even be a Linda question as well. Just wanted maybe get a little bit more clarification on the bulk water station. As the comments say here, the cost of construction, including the road extension, is approximately 700,000. And yes, it is a carryover from last year. How's that split up? Because that wouldn't be all just on water users, would it? It would be, is it tax supported, or I'll turn mine up.
I do. We did consider that 100% a water project. And so to get there, it's water. And to build it, it's water. We considered it that way, much like we consider the Main Street water main replacement a water project. It's not, you're not, excuse me, fixing underground infrastructure other than water, and the roads being torn up because of water. So all of those components go back to water. Yeah. I also, if I can, I just wanted to advise that we put the full amount of budget in, just because we don't have invoices yet, but that amount will be reduced when we bring back a second draft capital budget for you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions under environmental services? I note that neither in Public Works nor Environmental Services, and I say this because I'm not sure where it belongs, there aren't any stormwater pond capital projects. And I'm specifically noting the Brighton by the Bay pond and some upgrades that may be needed there. Is that operational, or is?
I think we're considering it operational at this point, and we have tried to clean up a few aspects to that over the last month or two. So, but I think it's operational because it's not shown here. So I think it's an operational concern, and maybe Linda can just expand on that.
Dr. Whitfield.
So yeah, it's a maintenance issue with those ponds, and they do fall under Public Works. So you'll see them under 311366. Leslie.
Now you're getting technical. We won't see it under that. Yeah, I know that there's still some significant work to be done, particularly in the Brighton by the Bay Pond. But I also want to make sure that when we come to the operational budget, that we talk about where we are with the master plan and that we're keeping up to speed, given council's direction with regard to the stormwater master plan. So thank you for that. Bit offside, I apologize. Any other questions under environmental services? Okay, so that takes us to the end of the report. Would council like to go through the spreadsheet now? Do we want to send the recommendations, the discussion back to staff, have some of those answers come back to us before we go through the spreadsheet? I think that'd probably be wise, given that I think there's going to be some extra dollars that'll come to us and we'll need to make some decisions around that. So I just want to make sure that everybody has the same notes that I have or similar. And the questions that were asked around information that's going to come back to this. And by the way, I've just noticed I had a question from Public Works that I forgot to ask. So Director Whiteman, I apologize. But my question is, and it's only because I drive it every day, Little Lake Road from Tees Lane to County Road 30 is, I'll exaggerate here, a little bit like driving through Sarajevo. It's not. That's more like driving the other side of Little Lake Road into Crammy Township. And I've told that to Mayor Martin, by the way. Sorry, Mayor Martin, if you're listening. but we have a pretty serious, and I think it's the former Director of Public Works informed me that he thought it would be a very serious reconstruction and maybe even having to urbanize that portion of the road because of the drainage issues. I don't see it anywhere here, but that roadway is in a pretty serious state of disrepair. I leave that with you. How's that sound? Unless you have comment around it.
No comment, but take it into
Thank you.
consideration.
I doubt it's even half a kilometer. Yeah, I doubt it's even half a kilometer, but it would probably be more than a single surface treatment. It would probably require some yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we have design and some possible reconstruction work around Harbor, Wallace and Marina for dollars and cents to be considered. The one I just mentioned, the question about whether we want 2 or 3 air conditioning units at 170 Main. Questions about trucks in Public Works, specific to the 2-ton and the electric vehicle trucks in Public Works. I don't think we need Parks and Rec to bring anything back with their equipment discussions. I think those are council decisions at the end of the day. We have the recommendation from staff on that. Whether or not we need to include anything from a capital perspective for automatic speed enforcement in the budget. Members of council, what did I miss? I feel like I've missed something. Go ahead, Director.
I had, when will we need to replace the 2008 Sterling single axle? I had, why are the HVAC units on 170 Main twice the price as 35 Alice? I had, Leslie, are the F550s 2-ton trucks? Because I think that's an error on my spreadsheet. I think that's, and then Jim was asked to provide wage costs for cemetery maintenance. And so long ago, you asked me to provide something, but I've already sent it to you. So I even forget what it is. Sorry.
Well, if it's done, it's done. Yeah, Councillor Fredis. Your microphone so that the whole world can hear you.
The EV charging station and the drone for the fire department.
So the drone for the fire department would be a discussion, I think, internally and to bring you into that. I don't think we needed to come back to budget unless what we discover is we can't do it, in which case the chief would make an alternative recommendation. going down that road, and the EV charging station. I guess we want some more costs, grants, placements. If we have to have four, I don't even know the terminology. If we need 2 with 4 heads, or two-headed monsters, where would we put those? And how? And how do we recoup the costs over time? Right.
And I was going to circulate something about that.
Thank you. So some of you got off really lucky, but one of you didn't. But in fairness, not the first time Public Works has had to come back with more information. So that's what happens when yours is the largest budget in the community. Okay. I have to find the agenda. Yeah. The question is, where did I put it? Oh, here it is. So I'll ask one more time if there's any questions or comments from members of council before I read the motion to receive the staff report. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, that the first draft of the 2024 capital budget be received as information. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Mr. Jefferson, do you have any questions? You're good. Thank you. We have no closed session meeting, and therefore it is 8:16 p.m. I will declare this committee of the whole meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.